Your face is finished.
MASH ran for 11 seasons. Its finale drew more than 106 million viewers, a record that still stands. The people who made that show were beloved in a way few television casts ever have been. Some of them are still here. Many of them are not. And the stories of how they left are harder than most people realize. This is how each MASH cast member died, and it's worse than you think.
This is my outfit. I make the decisions. Your outfit? I built this outfit with my own hands. When we first came over that hill, we didn't even have a bedpan to our name.
McLean Stevenson, Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake. McLean Stevenson made one of the most consequential decisions of his career in 1975 when he chose to leave MASH after 3 seasons. He wanted to be the star, not part of an ensemble. He told TV Guide at the time that he was tired of being one of 6 and wanted to be one of 1. The producers honored his request by killing his character in a way that blindsided the audience completely. Henry Blake, finally discharged and on his way home to Bloomington, Illinois, was killed when his plane went down in the Sea of Japan. The writers waited until the day of shooting to inform the cast of their decision. The shocked and tearful reactions on camera were barely an act at all. The writers and producers had made a deliberate choice to keep the ending secret from the studio, from the network, and from most of the cast until the cameras were already rolling. Loretta Swit, who learned what was happening minutes before the scene was filmed, has spoken about that afternoon many times since. The idea was that nothing could be more authentic than genuine grief, and they were right. When Gary Berghoff's radar walks into the operating room and reads the announcement aloud in the middle of surgery, there is no performance in it. It was a genuine moment of shock, and it showed on every face in that room. The audience was equally unprepared. When the episode aired on March 18, 1975, the telephone lines at CBS were overwhelmed. The network received thousands of letters of complaint, not about the quality of the episode, which was widely praised, but about the decision to kill Henry Blake at all. Audiences felt the loss as personally as they would have felt the death of someone they actually knew. The producers had created something they hadn't fully anticipated, a piece of television that functioned like a real event in people's emotional lives. What followed for Stevenson was one of the more painful trajectories in television history. He was replaced by Harry Morgan, whose Colonel Potter became one of the show's most beloved characters, and MASH ran for 8 more seasons without him. Stevenson, meanwhile, launched a string of solo sitcoms. The McLean Stevenson Show, In the Beginning, Hello, Larry, and Condo, and every single one was canceled, most within a single season. He guest hosted The Tonight Show 58 times, filling in for Johnny Carson, and was genuinely funny doing it. But it was never the career he had imagined for himself. He said in later years that leaving MASH was the biggest mistake of his life, and that he had made the error of believing people loved McLean Stevenson, when in fact, they loved Henry Blake. By the early 1990s, he had been diagnosed with bladder cancer, and his public profile had faded almost entirely. His last significant acting work was a supporting role in the 1994 PBS miniseries Armistead Maupin's Tales of the City. He was recovering from bladder cancer surgery at the Encino Tarzana Regional Medical Center on February 15, 1996, when he suffered a sudden fatal heart attack. He was 68. He was cremated, and his ashes were interred at Forest Lawn, Hollywood Hills. His father, somewhat cruelly, had been a cardiologist. The day after Stevenson died, Roger Bowen, the actor who had played Henry Blake in the original 1970 MASH film, also died of a heart attack. On the same day, of the same cause, the two men had never met. The timing was one of those things you can't quite explain.
I declare this unit dry. Total prohibition, and that is an official order.
Larry Linville, Major Frank Byrne. Larry Linville played Frank Burns for 5 seasons and made himself one of the most recognizable figures on American television in the 1970s. The character was the show's primary comic villain, petty, self-righteous, cowardly, and deeply hypocritical. and Linville played him with a precision and commitment that genuine comedic skill requires. His castmates knew it and said so plainly. Gary Berghoff described him as a Renaissance man who built and flew his own airplane and could speak at length about the construction of the Egyptian pyramids. The role was, paradoxically, one of the hardest on the show to sustain. Playing the butt of every joke requires an enormous amount of disciplined restraint. You have to commit to the character's self-delusion completely without ever letting the audience see you winking at them. Linville did that for 5 years. When the tone of the show began shifting in the later seasons toward more dramatic territory, Frank Burns became harder to write. The character was too broadly drawn for the more serious stories MASH was telling. Linville felt it and made peace with it. When offered a 2-year renewal, he turned it down. He told an interviewer he had done everything possible with Frank Burns, and there was nothing left to discover. He left MASH in 1977, replaced by David Ogden Stiers as the very different Major Winchester, a foil who was at least Frank's equal in wit and surgery, and whose emotional complexity gave the show something new to work with: the character of Frank Burns. Per the show's unwritten agreement after McLean Stevenson's departure, was given a quiet exit rather than a dramatic one. He was transferred stateside after a mental breakdown and promoted to lieutenant colonel in absentia. Linville's post-MASH work, by his own admission, never came close to the visibility he had found as Frank Burns. He was honest about it. He once said in an interview that after his agent, manager, accountant, the US government and his ex-wives had all taken their share, his MASH residuals were enough to pay his car insurance. He had been married 5 times. His health had been slowly undermined by decades of heavy smoking and drinking. In February 1998, doctors found a malignant tumor under his sternum. Surgery was performed to remove part of his lung. His body struggled to recover over the following 2 years. He was working when he could. He appeared in the Paper Mill Playhouse revival of Crazy for You in 1999, playing a theater owner in a small desert town, which felt, given the arc of his career, like a part that had been written for him. On April 10, 2000, Linville died of pneumonia at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York City. He was 60. He died on the 85th birthday of his former co-star, Harry Morgan. Berghoff, who had been filming a reunion segment with him just weeks before, was, by his manager's description, genuinely shaken when the news reached him. Alda remembered him warmly and publicly. Despite the character he played, the man himself was, by all accounts, genuinely liked by every person he worked with.
Pay no mind to my friend here. He majored in crudeness at med school.
Med school? Listen, before I was drafted, I was a transmission mechanic.
Wayne Rogers, Captain Trapper, John McIntyre. Wayne Rogers had originally planned to audition for the role of Hawkeye Pierce when MASH was being cast in 1972. He found the character too cynical and asked instead to test for Trapper John, whose outlook seemed brighter to him. He was told the 2 characters would have equal importance on the show. That assurance turned out to be accurate for exactly as long as it took audiences to fall in love with Alda's Hawkeye. Rogers was talented and knew it, and watching the writers increasingly build the show around Alda while Trapper gradually became a supporting player wore on him. He and Alda were close off camera. Alda said so directly and publicly, but professionally, Rogers felt stripped of the things that had made the character worth playing. The writers gave Hawkeye the thoracic surgery specialty that, in the original film, had belonged to Trapper. The best dramatic moments went to Hawkeye. Rogers was left to be the sidekick. He also had a contractual dispute with the studio over a morality clause he found objectionable, one that gave management the right to suspend an actor for immoral behavior without defining the term. He found that kind of open-ended authority unacceptable. He left after the 3rd season, along with McLean Stevenson, in what amounted to a double departure that could have seriously damaged the show. Instead, MASH replaced both of them with Harry Morgan and Mike Farrell and grew larger. Trapper John's exit was written as a quiet discharge happening off-screen while Hawkeye was. Rogers rebuilt his life in ways that surprised people. He became a serious, successful investor, built a financial management company, sat on corporate boards, and became a regular presence on Fox News' financial programming. He co-produced Broadway productions of Brighton Beach Memoirs, Biloxi Blues, and a revival of The Odd Couple. He was, by all accounts, genuinely happy with how his life turned out. In later years, he said that if he had known MASH was going to run as long as it did, he might have kept his mouth shut and stayed. In late 2015, Rogers fell ill with pneumonia. He died in Los Angeles on December 31st, 2015, New Year's Eve, from complications of the illness. He was 82. His friend and former co-star Alan Alda wrote afterward, "He was smart, funny, curious, and dedicated. We made a pact to give MASH all we had, and it bonded us. I loved Wayne. I'll miss him very much."
Well, I'm overwhelmed. I think it's a dandy likeness.
Harry Morgan, Colonel Sherman T. Potter. Harry Morgan came to MASH in a way that television history rarely manages. He had actually guest starred on the show in 1974, a full year before joining the regular cast, playing the mentally unbalanced Major General Bartford Hamilton Steele, who arrives to inspect the 4077th and orders the entire camp to relocate closer to the front lines. His performance was so striking that when the producers were looking for a replacement for McLean Stevenson's Henry Blake, they remembered him immediately. He was cast as Colonel Potter, a career Army officer who was everything Henry Blake was not: disciplined, experienced, quietly funny, and genuinely respected. He won an Emmy for the role in 1980. Morgan had been in the business since the 1940s. He appeared in more than 100 films, playing bad guys, lawmen, sidekicks, and soldiers across 4 decades. His most recognized work before MASH had come from playing Officer Bill Gannon alongside Jack Webb in the late 1960s television revival of Dragnet, a role that established him as someone who could project steady, unflappable authority. What Potter added to that quality was warmth. The colonel was firm but fair, more father figure than commanding officer, and audiences responded to him as if he had always been there. The horse Sophie that appeared in the show was Morgan's own real quarter horse from his ranch in Santa Rosa. When Potter says goodbye to Sophie in the series finale, a quiet, private moment amid the broader chaos of the camp breaking up, it was genuine. The drawing on the wall behind Potter's desk in every episode had been made by Morgan's own grandson. The photograph on the desk was of his first wife, Eileen. Morgan was also, during his later years, a man with a private chapter that became public. In 1996, 13 years after MASH had ended, he was arrested on domestic battery charges for striking his wife Barbara, who was hospitalized with bruises. The case was dismissed after Morgan completed anger management and domestic violence counseling. It was a serious matter, and one that sat uncomfortably alongside the warm image he had built across decades. He spent his final years quietly at home in Los Angeles. He died peacefully in his sleep at his Los Angeles home on December 7, 2011. He was 96 years old, one of the oldest working actors in Hollywood history. He had recently been treated for pneumonia. His son Charles confirmed the death. He was cremated, and his ashes were given to his family.
As long as we're going to be spending some time together, why don't we get acquainted? I'm Father Mulcahy.
William Christopher, Father Francis Mulcahy. William Christopher had almost missed the role entirely. The actor originally cast as Father Mulcahy in the pilot episode was George Morgan, who appeared in a single episode and was then replaced. Christopher auditioned, apparently annoyed the producers by ad-libbing lines in his screen test, and got the job anyway because his instincts were exactly right for the character. He played Mulcahy for all 11 seasons. The character started as peripheral, present, but rarely at the center of an episode, and grew over time into one of the show's most emotionally resonant figures. The writers discovered that Mulcahy's position as a man of faith operating in a place of constant suffering allowed them to explore questions they couldn't raise through the doctor. Christopher brought a gentleness to it that was entirely his own. He was Methodist in real life, playing a Catholic priest, and approached the character with the same care he brought to everything else. There was never a moment in 11 years where you could catch him performing the role rather than inhabiting it. Al and Alda intervened to keep Christopher on the show during the 5th season when he had been bedridden with hepatitis for 8 weeks, and the producers were seriously discussing writing Mulcahy out entirely. Alda wrote a script that incorporated Christopher's actual illness into a Mulcahy storyline and made the case privately and publicly that the character needed to stay. He knew how much Christopher's family depended on the income. His son Ned had autism at a time when the condition was poorly understood and institutionalization was still the most common advice given to parents. Christopher and his wife Barbara refused that path. They advocated publicly, raised awareness where they could, and in 1988 wrote Mixed Blessings, a book about their experience. It was, by every account, the most important work of William Christopher's life. In mid-2015, Christopher was diagnosed with non-lung small cell carcinoma. He responded to treatment for more than a year, but by December 2016, the disease had returned and his condition had deteriorated quickly. He entered hospice care at his home in Pasadena, California. Loretta Swit, who had been his co-star for 11 years, said afterward that she had never heard him complain or lose his temper. He died on December 31st, 2016, New Year's Eve, exactly 1 year to the day after his former co-star Wayne Rogers had died on the same date the year before. He was 84. His wife Barbara was at his bedside. The coincidence of the two deaths, two MASH cast members dying on the same date, a year apart, both on New Year's Eve, was the kind of thing the show's writers would have thought too neat to use. Life doesn't worry about that kind of thing. It just keeps going. And sometimes the calendar lines up in ways that don't make any particular sense, except to remind you that time was always passing, even when the show felt like it was standing still.
I wanted to play, but I do not have the gift. I can play the notes, but I cannot.
David Ogden Stiers, Major Charles Emerson, Winchester III. David Ogden Stiers joined MASH in 1977 in the 6th season, taking over from Larry Linville as the show's resident antagonist, though Winchester and Frank Burns were very different animals. Where Burns was buffoonish, Winchester was sharp, educated, and surgically skilled. He was the only character on the show who could genuinely go toe-to-toe with Hawkeye and win. The character had grown up in Boston, attended Harvard, and moved through the world with the particular kind of arrogance that comes from never having been seriously challenged. Stiers played him with visible pleasure. There are episodes where you can almost feel him savoring every syllable, and he made Winchester funny in a completely different register from the broad comedy of his predecessor. The show used him well in the final seasons. Some of Winchester's most memorable moments were dramatic rather than comic. An episode about a group of Chinese musicians, another about a wounded soldier facing amputation, and Stiers handled them with a restraint that earned him 2 Emmy nominations. The character never quite softened, but the audience came to understand him, which was something the show's writers were very good at doing. His life after MASH was full and varied. He did voice work for Disney, Cogsworth in Beauty and the Beast, Governor Ratcliffe in Pocahontas, Dr. Jumba Jookaburra in Lilo and Stitch, and his baritone voice was in constant demand for narration and orchestral conducting. He was the resident conductor of the Newport Symphony Orchestra in Oregon for many years and guest conducted dozens of orchestras around the world. He was, by those who worked with him musically, considered genuinely gifted, not a celebrity dabbling in a hobby, but someone who had built serious musical knowledge over decades. In 2009, at the age of 66, Stiers publicly came out as gay, an announcement he said he had delayed for years because so much of his career had been built on family-friendly material, and he had worried about the professional consequences. By the time he came out, he felt the landscape had changed enough that honesty mattered more than caution. The response from his MASH family was warm. Loretta Swit called him extraordinary. Al and Alda shared a memory of him skateboarding to work down busy Los Angeles streets at speed. cheerfully ignoring the security guards. He was diagnosed with bladder cancer and fought the disease for some time. He died at his home in Newport, Oregon on March 3, 2018. He was 75. His agent's statement read simply, "His talent was only surpassed by his heart."
Without a murmur of dissent, without so much as a whitefish whimper, it gave itself up to me. Its very molecules of protein.
Alan Alda, Captain Benjamin Hawkeye Pierce. Alan Alda is still alive. He is 89 years old as of early 2026, and he is still working, hosting a podcast called Clear and Vivid, making occasional television appearances, and living with the Parkinson's disease he was first diagnosed with in 2015. He announced the diagnosis publicly in July 2018 during an interview on CBS This Morning, explaining that he had noticed his thumb twitching in television footage taken during press appearances for the podcast and decided to get ahead of whatever story might be written about it from a sad point of view. That was how he put it, which is exactly how Hawkeye Pierce would have put it. He was diagnosed in 2015 after experiencing a symptom that initially seemed unrelated to Parkinson's. He was acting out his dreams while asleep, a behavior that is now recognized as one of the condition's early markers. He dreamed someone was attacking him and, in reality, threw a pillow at his wife. When he described this to a neurologist and was tested, the diagnosis came back positive. He had kept it private for 3 years, continuing to act, write, and speak publicly at the pace he had always kept. The disease has progressed since then. He has spoken about difficulties with dexterity, with balance, with the daily logistics of physical life that most people take for granted. He has also spoken about all of it with a frankness and a dry humor that has made his public conversations about Parkinson's among the most valuable contributions anyone with the disease has made to public understanding of it. He says managing it has become almost a full-time job of finding small workarounds, and that the puzzle-solving aspect of it keeps him curious and engaged. That is not performance. People who know him say it's simply how he's built. He is the last major figure of MASH still standing with full public presence. Mike Farrell, who played BJ Honeycutt for 8 seasons, is also still alive, as are Loretta Sweet, Jamie Farr, and Gary Berghoff. But Alda carries something particular, the weight of having been the face of the show from the first episode to the last, of having written and directed the finale, of having been present for 256 episodes without a single exception. When the cast gathered for a 30th anniversary reunion in 2002, previously filmed interviews with McLean Stevenson and Larry Linville were included because both men had already died. When they gathered again in 2024 for a special commemorating the show's 50-year history, the list of who could still appear in person was shorter still. His career on MASH was singular. He is the only person ever to win Emmy Awards for acting, writing, and directing on the same program. He appeared in all 256 episodes. He wrote and directed the finale, Goodbye, Farewell, and Amen, which aired on February 28, 1983, and was watched by more than 106 million people. That number has never been surpassed by a scripted series finale. The ad slots during the finale sold for more money per 30 seconds than some slots during the Super Bowl broadcast that year. He is still married to his wife Arlene, whom he met in 1957 at a party in New York, where both of them ate a piece of rum cake that had fallen on the floor when no one else would. They have been married for nearly 70 years. He talks about her in every interview. He is, by his own description, the luckiest man he knows. A statement that, given the arc of his life and the Parkinson's and the losses accumulating around him, takes a certain kind of courage to keep saying. The ones still here. 5 of MASH's main cast members are still alive as of 2026. Alan Alda, Loretta Swit, Mike Farrell, Jamie Farr, and Gary Berghoff. Each of them has carried the show's legacy in their own way for more than 4 decades. Loretta Swit, who played Margaret Hot Lips Houlihan for all 11 seasons, has remained active in theater and television and has become a prominent animal rights advocate. She was nominated for an Emmy in all but the first season of MASH. Her tribute to William Christopher after his death, she called him someone whose goodness was a great argument for there being a heaven, gave a sense of what the bonds forged on that show actually meant. Mike Farrell, who replaced Wayne Rogers as B.J. Hunnicutt in the 4th season and stayed until the end, has spent much of his post-MASH life in advocacy, human rights, capital punishment abolition, animal welfare. He remains close to Alda and has spoken publicly about the losses the cast has sustained over the years, with the same steady decency that defined B.J. Hunnicutt. Jamie Farr, who played Corporal Klinger across all 11 seasons, grew from a one-day guest appearance into one of the show's most beloved characters. He is 90 years old and still active in regional theater. Gary Berghoff, the only actor from the original 1970 film to reprise his role in the television series, played Radar O'Reilly through first 8 seasons. He is 81 and largely retired from public life. They are what remains. The show they made together ran longer than the war it depicted, reached more people than almost anything else in television history, and changed what American audiences expected from a weekly comedy. The ones who are gone are gone. The ones who are still here carry all of it. When the production wrapped for the last time on January 14, 1983, after 11 seasons, 256 episodes, and more than a decade of the cast spending more of their waking lives at the 4,077th than anywhere else, Alan Alda wrote in his diary that it felt like losing a limb. The characters had become as real to the people playing them as they were to the audience watching. That doesn't happen often. When it does, it leaves a mark that doesn't fade. No matter how many years go by after the credits roll for the last time, the cast of MASH carried the 4,077th with them for the rest of their lives. Several of them carry it still. 6 people from that cast who are no longer alive. Some went quietly, some went in stages with years of struggle behind them. Some left the show early and spent the rest of their lives in the shadow of what they'd walked away from. Others stayed to the end and still couldn't quite escape the weight of it. MASH was about the cost of things, the cost of war, of service, of holding yourself together when the work in front of you is impossible. Watching the real lives of the people who played those roles, it turns out that cost didn't stop when the cameras went off. It was something they carried, some more heavily than others. If this video brought back some memories, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. There are more stories like these ahead, and we'd love to have you here for them.